Millionaire sinks in river, but a homeless woman dives in and her secret shocks the world. Chapter 1. She jumped, and IT wasn't for the money. Some things only happen in soap operas. And in real life too. Just ask the man who sank in an armored car at the bottom of the river and was saved by a homeless woman. No one ever looked in the eyes. Yeah, the world spins, and sometimes it spins hard. And that day, it spun with force. It was a muggy Thursday morning. The kind where even the wind feels tired. The sky was gray, kind of undecided, and the city throbbed like a nervous heart. Traffic on the bridge was slow, horns here, swearing there, until a different sound tore through the air. Bang, a dry thud, like God had slammed heaven's door shut. The black, armored car slid over the edge of the bridge like it was running from its own fate, and it dove into the river with the sad elegance of a body without a soul. Those who saw it screamed. Those who heard it froze, and those who passed just kept going, because that's how it is, right? No one has time to save anyone, but she did. No one knew her name. They just called her the viaduct woman. Some said she was crazy, others mute. She slept wrapped in a purple blanket with a broken radio at her side and a crucifix around her neck, one she kissed every night, even when no one was watching. When the car sank, she ran. That's right. She ran, barefoot, with a torn dress. She slipped through the crowd, ignored the screams, and jumped in like someone diving into their own past. And look, it wasn't pretty. The river was cold, filthy, and the current pulled like a drowning man's hand. But she went deep, and when she came back, dragging the man's unconscious body to the shore, the crowd fell silent, because that man was no ordinary man. He was Gustavo Ramirez, owner of 3 shopping mall chains, majority shareholder of a multinational oil company, and, believe it or not, known as the most armored man in Brazil, both in his car and in life. But in that moment, he looked more fragile than any homeless soul. The woman coughed, spitting out water and pain. The crowd screamed, phones recorded, and when they asked why she did it, she answered with a hoarse voice, one that had swallowed more memories than water, because he's my son. Silence. The kind that makes even time stop. A reporter stammered, the camera shook, and a police officer, notebook in hand, dropped his pen. It was impossible, absurd, scandalous. But in her eyes, there was too much truth to be a lie, and that's where this story begins. My friends, if you're someone who loves a good story, hit that like and subscribe, or you'll miss what's coming next. Because what this woman is about to reveal will make even Christ the Redeemer close. His eyes in shame. Chapter 2. The son of the wind and the mother of trash. They say that those who seek find, but no one warns you that what you find might be worse than what you lost. And that day, Brazil uncovered a secret no one saw coming. Millionaire Gustavo Ramirez, saved by a woman who lived among rats, cardboard, and silence, and who claimed to be his mother. Ah, if she were just another crazy woman, the police would have locked her away already. But there was something in her eyes, in that precise movement of pulling the man's body by the collar, in the kiss she placed on his forehead afterward, that didn't match a lie. It wasn't a scene. It was a story. The problem was, no one knew her story. Or rather, everyone had forgotten it. Gustavo was taken to the hospital in serious condition, but alive. The accident left bruises and a mild traumatic injury, but the real impact was deeper. That's when journalists started digging even deeper than the river he had fallen into. Who was that woman? Her name, they later discovered, was Lúcia Helena dos Anjos, born in 1964 in São Gonçalo. A trained nurse, according to records, missing for over 30 years, according to her family. Homeless for at least 12. Now, get this, in the registry office's records, it showed that Lúcia had given birth at 17, father unknown, child's name, Gustavo. Coincidence? Maybe. But Brazil loves a coincidence with the face of a tragedy. The internet went wild. Sensationalist sites exploded. Some said it was a scam. Others claimed she was a fallen saint. But no one, absolutely no one, really knew what had happened between that woman and the man she claimed to have brought into the world. Then, a letter surfaced. An old, yellow letter, handwritten, found by one of the reporters inside the broken radio Lúcia always carried with her. And do you know what it said? If one day you come looking for me, I'll be where you left me, under the bridge, But above the lie, sign, Mom, and Brazil stopped. Because either that was a genius-level performance, or it was one of the greatest family secrets ever buried by a man who grew up saying his mother had died in childbirth. Yeah, some families hide the past in the basement, others drown it in the river. Meanwhile, Gustavo was waking up in the ICU, dazed, his face swollen, his eyes locked onto some memory he didn't seem ready to face. They asked him if he knew the woman. He took a deep breath and answered with a stubborn tear, "She smells the same as when I was a child." And in that moment, the entire country shivered, because some things only the heart remembers, even when the mind forgets. But this was just the beginning. Chapter 3, The Scent of Truth. You know, what's the hardest thing to hide in this world? It's not money, it's not sin, it's a mother's scent, because that clings to your soul. And when Gustavo, millionaire, armored, respected, and feared, caught the scent of the woman who had saved him, his silence spoke louder than any press conference ever could. In that hospital room, surrounded by glass walls, monitors, and security guards, he asked for just one thing: let her in. The doctors looked at each other. The company's legal team nearly lost their minds, but he stood firm for the first time. It seemed the one in charge was the boy inside the man. And then she walked in. Lúcia entered slowly, clothes still damp, feet bare, and eyes heavy with a lifetime that never dried. She stopped at the door, looked at her son with the kind of pain no medicine could cure. He tried to smile, but she was the first to speak. "You look just like your father, but you've got my eyes." He lowered his. The truth was heavy as lead. The air grew thick. It was hard to breathe. She stepped closer to the bed like someone returning home after years in exile. She touched his hand and said, "You grew up handsome, even without me." Silence exploded inside Gustavo's chest. He tried to hide it, cough, change the subject. "Why did you disappear?" She laughed, a laugh without teeth, without makeup, but full of scars. "I didn't disappear. I was disappeared." And that's when the story started to twist, because until then, everyone thought she had abandoned her son, that she had lost her mind, run away, left the baby behind to live in the streets. But no, what she said next even made the nurse cry behind the curtain. "I was committed against my will. They said I was unstable, that I was making things up. But what I had was fear of revealing who your father was. And your father was the powerful." Gustavo's eyes widened. That matched things he'd heard in his teenage years, things his adoptive family had dismissed as fantasy. Lúcia went on. "They diagnosed me with schizophrenia, without any tests. I spent 3 years locked up. When I got out, you were already with another family, and I couldn't get near you, or else jail." He held her hand for the first time, without disgust, without hesitation, and asked his name. "Who was my father?" She paused, took a deep breath, and whispered like someone spitting out old poison, "Senator Arreo Dines." Gustavo's world collapsed. The senator, the same one who funded charity campaigns, donated millions to daycares, had pictures with every president in the last 20 years? Yes, that one. Lúcia lowered her gaze, and then said the sentence that would become a headline the next morning. "I'm the living proof of what he tried to kill." Now it was official. This wasn't just a story about mother and son. It was about power, politics, and a Brazil that loves to pretend it forgot. And what was coming next was going to stink worse than a rotting river in summer. Chapter 4, The Torn Photo and the Censored Name. Some past we keep in a showbox. Others we try to bury in the backyard of the soul. But some, the more we hide them, the more they stink. And Senator Arreo Dines' past was the kind not even French perfume could mask. The morning after Lúcia's revelation, Brazil woke up different. Traditional newspapers hesitated. Social media didn't. Illegitimate child of the powerful. Homeless woman exposes senator's scandal. These headlines were popping up every second. But the strongest one came from an obscure blog. One of those nobody reads. But it hit a nerve. The woman from the trash might bring down an empire. Gustavo read that in silence, lying in his hospital bed, while outside his door lawyers debated loudly whether he should deny, stay silent, or sue. But he was far from there. He was trapped in a childhood memory that came back out of nowhere. A photo, yes, an old photo, one he'd always found strange. A black and white portrait, stored in an unmarked envelope, found at the bottom of a box when he was about 12. It showed a smiling woman holding a baby, him. On the back, a faded dedication and a name angrily crossed out. At the time, he'd asked his adoptive mother who it was. She said, "Some sick woman who wanted you back." Forget it, son. But now it all made sense. That woman was Lúcia, and the name that had been scratched out was Areo. Gustavo asked them to find that box to bring him the photo, and while he waited, he called someone he never imagined he would, his personal crisis manager. "I want everything on the senator. I want a dossier, files, scandals, donations, mistresses, crimes, buried stories, anything." And fast. Silence on the other end. Then, a sharp reply. "Do you want to destroy the father who denied you, or the politician who quietly funded your rise?" Gustavo took a while to answer, because that one hurt. Yes, Areo had helped his career. Yes, he had seemingly appeared out of nowhere at 19, backed by a mysterious fund that paid for college, his first investments, the right connections. But Gustavo had never known where that guardian angel came from. Now he did, and the taste was bitter. Meanwhile, Lúcia was taken by a social worker to a temporary shelter. The woman of the purple blanket now slept in a clean bed, but her eyes were still clouded with pain. And it was there that a young reporter, the kind who still believed in real journalism, came looking for her. "Is Lúcia? Why now? Why stay silent for so long?" Lúcia looked into the girl's eyes and answered, with the calm of someone who has already lost everything, "Because now, he looked at me as a son. Before, he was just another man who thought love could be bought with donations." The reporter trembled, and as she turned to leave, she heard one more line, "And I haven't even started telling what they did to me in that hospital." Pause. Recorder off. Heart racing. Because if the senator had a secret, that hospital might just be the vault, and the key was in the memory of a woman Brazil threw in the trash, but who remembered everything. Chapter 5. The hospital that cured what didn't exist. There are places that claim to heal the soul, but only serve to bury living truths. And the hospital where Lúcia was institutionalized was exactly that. Spotless on the outside, rotten on the inside. Its name commanded respect. Santa Milan Psychiatric Institute. Imposing Fawade, well-kept gardens, Sunday Mass, and a glowing feature on national TV praising its advancements in female treatment. But behind those walls, what happened couldn't fit into any medical chart. Gustavo ordered an investigation. Personally, no media involved. He assembled a private team of 3, a human rights attorney, a former patient who now worked as a nurse assistant, and a hacker who owed him a favor from a past political campaign. And what they found would make a priest faint. First came Lúcia's file. Admission date, March 1982. Reason, maternal delusions with possible personality disorder. Recommendation, intensive isolation. But the chilling detail was the stamp, referred by Areo Dinas, and further down, legal guardian, unknown. In other words, Lúcia had been committed directly under the influence of then Congressman Areo, even before he became a senator, and more than that, with no official authorization, no family member, no proper evaluation, no court order, just the word of a politician and the silence of a system. She spent 3 years inside, 3 years drugged, restrained, denied visitors, forbidden to write or call anyone. Gustavo read it all, jaw clenched, because if it were fiction, he'd say it was over the top. But it was real, and now it had names, dates, and case numbers. The attorney went further. She found 5 other similar cases, all women, all young, all connected to powerful men, all with the same diagnosis, affective delusions, and one of them had vanished without a trace. But the final blow came when the hacker broke into the hospital's old files, and there, in a forgotten backup, he found something devastating. Audio recordings of treatment sessions. One of them was Lúcia's, her voice, young, shaky, trying to tell her story. She spoke about the birth, the baby taken on the 2nd day, the nurse who cried and then disappeared, and about the important man who said none of it could ever get out. The doctor cut her off with lines like, "You need to forget this, Lúcia. Don't you want to be a good woman?" And she cried, didn't scream, cried quietly like someone who'd already learned that screaming doesn't help. When Gustavo heard the audio, he broke down, alone, in his office. He slammed the desk and muttered to no one. I was the secret they tried to erase. In that moment, something inside him changed. The armored businessman began to crack, and through that fracture emerged the boy who had never known where he came from. Now he knew, and he had fire in his eyes. Meanwhile, the rest of Brazil was beginning to suspect. Reports surfaced, questioning the institute, but nothing, yet, directly linked Arreo to the horrors within. The senator, for his part, called a press conference, arrogant, impeccable. He spoke firmly. I've never seen this woman in my life. It's a farce, a low attempt to smear my legacy, and then, with chilling cynicism, besides, I have no children outside my marriage, and if I do, they are products of madness, not love. On the other side of the screen, Lúcia watched in silence and whispered, then he'll remember what he did to me that night, because the worst part hadn't even been told yet. Chapter 6, the night no one wanted to remember. Some memories don't just return. They invade, and when they invade, they don't ask permission. That's how it was for Lúcia. It wasn't that she wanted to remember. It was the memory that came back on its own, like an old scream that had never been heard. That night, in the silent shelter, as the TV showed the senator denying everything, her face hardened. The fingers that used to tremble were now steady. She called over the reporter who'd been following her, asked to record, and spoke with a voice clearer than the country deserved to hear. It's time. Silence. The camera rolled, and what came next couldn't fit in small words. She told everything. It was February 1981. She had just turned 17. She was a nursing intern in the office of a rising congressman, Arreo Dines, young, handsome, eloquent, the kind who charms crowds and destroys in silence. It started with flattery, then coffee requests, late-night favors, rides home, until one day, he locked the door. Lúcia swallowed hard. Her gaze drifted, but her voice stayed firm. It wasn't love. It was power. She tried to leave. He smiled, said it was part of the game, that she should feel honored. When she cried, he wiped her face with a handkerchief and then burned it in the ashtray. It was like he wanted to erase any proof that I existed in that moment. Weeks later, she discovered the pregnancy. She was removed. The following month, she was out on the streets. When she tried to press charges, they laughed in her face, said she was obsessed, that she must have enjoyed it. That's when hell began. They said I was unstable, took me to a psychiatrist linked to the party. The next day, I woke up tied to a hospital bed. No one knew, not even my sister. Lúcia took a deep breath. The video kept rolling. No cuts, no fake drama. What hurt the most was losing him, my son, my Gustavo. They said he'd been adopted by a good family. Then they said he died. Then that he never existed. I thought I was going insane. The camera shook. The reporter couldn't hold back tears anymore. And then came the final blow. But when I saw that car fall, I knew it was him, because a mother feels it. And I had already lost him once. I wasn't going to lose him again. The video exploded on social media. It wasn't a journalistic scoop. It was a punch to the country's soul. Arreo's PR team tried to take the video down, but it was too late. The truth runs faster than rumors when it comes wrapped in honest tears. And Gustavo, when he watched it, he didn't say a word. He got out of bed against doctor's orders, grabbed his car, and drove straight to the senator's house. Security tried to stop him. He shouted, either he sees me, or I tell the whole country right here at the gate. The gate opened, and that meeting was going to be anything but civil. Chapter 7, the meeting with the devil in a suit. Some reunions don't bring hugs. They bring reckoning, and when Gustavo walked into that mansion, he wasn't there to visit his father. He was there to face the man who, for 38 years, lived as if Gustavo were a mistake to be buried. Senator Arreo Dines waited for him on the veranda, sitting, beige suit, whiskey in hand, the expression of someone who never loses. But right then, my friend, the tide was about to turn, because the blood running through both their veins was the same, but their eyes were not. Gustavo stopped in front of him, didn't extend a hand, didn't greet him, just stared, and said, with a voice that mixed sorrow and disgust, "She didn't lie." Arreo smiled, like someone talking to a stubborn child. "She's sick, always has been. You're being manipulated. I helped build your life. You know that." Gustavo stepped closer, eyes misty, but steady. You helped to keep me away. You paid for my rise like someone paying off a threat. Silence. The senator stood up slowly, whiskey still in hand, looked his son in the eye and said quietly, "You don't understand. I had a career, a name, a plan. I couldn't let a pregnancy with some nursing girl ruin it all." And in that moment, the world stopped. Gustavo, the man used to cold boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, lost his footing. The son within him surfaced all at once. You erased me from your story, threw my mother away like garbage. And now, you're telling me it was just a plan. Ariel put down the glass. The mask began to crack. She was weak. You would have been the same. I gave you a chance. I turned a bastard into an empire. Silence thickened. It felt like even time held its breath. Then, Gustavo pulled something from his pocket, a copy of his mother's psychiatric file. He folded it carefully and tossed it into the senator's lap. "I'm going to show Brazil who you really are. Not the politician, the man, the monster hiding behind social campaigns." The senator smiled, but there was no soul in it. "You won't, because if you do, you destroy everything you built. Your name, your company, your reputation. You carry my blood, and you'll die owing me every cent. And that's when, my friend," I heard the line that still gives me chills today. Gustavo stared deep into his eyes and said, "I'd rather be the son of a beggar than the heir of the devil." He turned his back, walked away without looking back. On the sidewalk, Lúcia waited, sitting on a bench across the street, with her purple blanket folded in her lap, like someone who never expected anything, but always knew someone would come back. He sat beside her, didn't say a word, neither did she. She simply laid her head on his shoulder and cried. This time, it wasn't from pain, but neither of them knew the senator wasn't the type to lose in silence, and the retaliation would come fast and dirty. Chapter 8. The power strikes back. Some people don't know how to lose. Others, when they do lose, prefer to take the whole board down with them, and Ariel Dinas was one of those. He didn't see defeat as the end. He saw it as a declaration of war. The morning after his encounter with Gustavo, the first retaliation came disguised as justice. A temporary interdiction order against Lúcia Helena dos Anjos, filed by a lawyer tied to the senator's philanthropic foundation. The alleged reason? Recurring delusional episodes posing a risk to herself and others. They tried to institutionalize her again, but this wasn't 1980 anymore. And Lúcia wasn't alone anymore. When the agents arrived, court order in hand, they found her sitting next to Gustavo on the same bench in the plaza where everything had begun to change. He read the document, tore it into 3 pieces, and said out loud, in front of cameras, "You won't silence the woman who gave me life twice." The crowd around them erupted in applause. Journalists, activists, bystanders. Their story was no longer a secret. It had become a symbol. But the senator's game went beyond official paperwork. That same night, Gustavo's company headquarters was broken into, computers ransacked, documents stolen, and the archive center set on fire. The police spoke of a short circuit, but the night guard swore he saw the masked men fleeing through the emergency exit. And there was more. The next day, 3 multi-million-dollar contracts were canceled. Investors backed out. Stock prices plummeted. An old scandal, buried 10 years ago, resurfaced in the media as if it had just been discovered, accusing Gustavo of rigging public bids, all of it out of nowhere. It was an all-out assault, political, financial, emotional, a siege, as if the senator were silently screaming, "You want to expose my name? Let's see who survives longer in the mud." Gustavo felt it. He wasn't invincible, but he wasn't blind anymore either, and he decided to strike back, not with power, but with truth. He called a press conference, not with his usual PR team, but at a community center in São Gonçalo, with a basic microphone and plastic chairs. At his side, Lúcia, facing the nation, and there, in front of the cameras, he said, "I was built on the money of lies, but I refuse to be an accomplice anymore." He told everything, from the accident to the revelations, from the investigation to the hospital. He showed documents, audios, letters, and in the end, read a quote from the old letter, the one found inside the broken radio. "If one day you come looking for me, I'll be where you left me, under the bridge, but above." The lie, the country cried. The internet froze. The Senate trembled. But Arreo didn't fall. Not yet. And the next step would be the hardest of all, proving in court that this wasn't just a tragic family drama. It was a crime, and a serious one. But the first obstacle was convincing a judge who had been having Sunday dinner with the senator for decades. Chapter 9. The Sunday barbecue judge. Some judges wear robes, others wear aprons. Because some cases aren't decided in court, they're decided over a grill, between a glass of whiskey and a fake laugh. And the judge who got Lucia's case smelled more like steak than justice. Dr. Eustaquio P. Nabrega. Nice name, deep voice. He looked like he'd walked out of a courtroom drama, but his record was dirtier than fryer grease. A close friend of Arreo Dina's since college, godfather to the senator's daughter, and, according to a buried whistleblower report from 2011, recipient of informal donations for his campaign for public prosecutor. This was the man now tasked with deciding whether Lucia was telling the truth or hallucinating in public, and from his first ruling, he showed his claws. He denied the request to open a criminal investigation against the hospital, claimed there was insufficient technical basis to reopen the case, and even dropped this gem: the memory of former psychiatric patients does not constitute valid evidence without contemporary reports attesting to their mental integrity. Translation: if you were ever called crazy, you could never tell the truth again. But what this judge didn't count on was the stubbornness of a mother and the strategy of a son who had learned to win in a world of wolves. Gustavo didn't go the traditional route. He sought out a woman, a judge, young, born and raised in the interior of Bahia, known for standing up to politicians and for her work in international human rights courts. Judge Selena Maria de Alcantara. They filed a parallel case in the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, alleging systematic violations of individual liberty, psychiatric abuse, and institutional persecution. The international press picked up the story. Organizations demanded answers, and Brazil found itself at the center of a diplomatic embarrassment. Meanwhile, Lucia underwent an independent medical evaluation by a Swiss team. The result: no signs of schizophrenia, delusions, or any disorder, only deep trauma and symptoms of PTSD, worsened by prolonged abuse in medical institutions. It was the bombshell they needed, and it went off live during a public Senate hearing, where Arreo was declaring his innocence for the 100th time. An opposition senator stood and read excerpts from the international report aloud. She concluded with a line that echoed through the chamber like a judge's gavel. If this woman is insane, then the entire country has been in a psychotic break for decades. The senator's face turned red, not with shame, because men like him don't feel that, but with rage. For the first time, he had lost control of the narrative, and that's when Gustavo entered the chamber, with the press watching. He walked across the floor, approached the podium, and stared silently at a paper in his hands. Then, he looked up and said, "Mr. President of the Chamber, honorable senators, I'm here not as an heir, nor as a businessman. I'm here as a son, as a Brazilian, as living proof that silence always protects the oppressor." And he placed the paper on the desk. It was a formal indictment, with full attachments, documents, recordings, medical reports, signed by over 20 lawyers, 5 doctors, and stamped by 3 international organizations. The entire country held its breath, but nothing could prepare the nation for what came the following week. Because when they dug deeper, they found more names, more women, and a pattern that went far beyond Lucia. Chapter 10. The name silence hid. There comes a time when truth stops being a secret and turns into a flood. And when they dug into Senator Arreo Dina's past, what surfaced wasn't an isolated case. It was a network, an old scheme, stitched together with silence, money, and fear. The report from the Human Rights Committee hit hard. 100 pages, detailed accounts, cross-referenced data, medical records, institutional logs, and the most shocking part, 19 women, 19 stories just like Lucia's, all young, all poor, all linked in some way to public figures, businessmen, congressmen, government officials, women who, upon becoming pregnant, speaking out, or simply causing too much trouble, were diagnosed with mental disorders and erased from public life through forced institutionalization. 3 of them weren't even 18. 7 died before ever being released. 2 disappeared without a trace. The name Santa Aline Hospital appeared in 13 of the cases. The rest involved affiliated clinics. All had records stamped with the same signature, the same handwriting. Dr. Helio Lacerda, a renowned psychiatrist, decorated and praised, and now exposed as a key accomplice in one of the filthiest political cover-ups in the country. With each new name, Gustavo felt the weight grow heavier. It wasn't just about his mother anymore. It was about all the mothers who were never allowed to be. And on a cold Wednesday morning, he made a decision to found an organization. The name, Daughters of Silence. Its mission to support, protect, and amplify the voices of all victims of abusive psychiatric confinement. Lawyers, psychologists, shelters, and above all, a place to be heard. The press embraced it. So did the public. But what really set things off was when a woman showed up at the foundation's door. She was holding a baby, and in her eyes was the same fear Lúcia once carried. Her name? Janette Silva, institutionalized for 6 months for paranoid postpartum behavior. The real reason? She had filed a complaint against a city councilman who tried to abuse her during a job training course. She escaped from the clinic after seeing Lúcia's video on TV, and there, at the foundation's entrance, she shouted, with a voice the entire country heard, her story saved me. It was like breaking the dam. In the days that followed, 5 more women arrived, and slowly, an avalanche of stories came together, patched, pieced, revealed, like a quilt of pain the country had long chosen to ignore. Meanwhile, Aurelio Dinas began to crumble. He lost support in the Senate, was removed from the Ethics Committee chair. Corporations pulled sponsorships, and finally, the public prosecutor's office launched a formal investigation against him for abuse of power, psychiatric manipulation, and paternity concealment. But like every man who builds his empire on fear, he still had one last card to play. In the middle of the night, an anonymous call was made to the hospital where Lúcia was now staying under judicial protection. The voice on the line said, "Just one thing, she can't make it to trial alive." The war had been declared, and now her life was worth more than gold. Chapter 11, the price of a witness. Some people are worth more dead than silenced. And Lúcia was one of them, not because of money or revenge, but because her life, now, was the line separating justice from impunity. The warning came. At 3:14 a.m. the night guard at the shelter answered the call and, on instinct, wrote down the number. But by the time he passed it on, the SIM card was already gone. A man's voice, deep, calm, calculated, no yelling, no insults, just one chilling message. This woman will die. Either you stop her, or we will. When Gustavo heard about it, his first reaction was fury. He threw his phone against the wall, called the security team, ordered immediate reinforcements. But deep down, he knew if they wanted to kill Lúcia, it wouldn't be with bullets. They'd use the same poison as always: silence, disappearance, manipulation. And that's when he changed the strategy. We're putting her in front of the cameras, every day, every hour. If she disappears, the whole country will know who did it. The next day, Lúcia gave a historic interview, broadcast live, on 8 TV networks and streamed on nearly every digital platform. The reporter, the same young woman from before, held the microphone with a trembling hand. But Lúcia stood like stone. "If I die in the coming days, it won't be because God wanted it. It'll be because power can't stand." A woman who remembers, and she told everything for the first time, with names, dates, details. The night shift doctor who vanished, the nurse who cried while handing out medication, the basement room where they administered tranquilizers, the psychiatrist who said the female mind is fragile, and the most shocking detail, the hidden room at the back of the psychiatric wing, where some women were kept off the books. I saw women who no longer knew their own names, and others who repeated, like a mantra. It was a madness. It was pregnancy. At the end of the interview, Lúcia looked into the camera, eyes glistening, but no tears fell. "I didn't come back for revenge. I came to warn. Hell isn't beneath the earth. It's at the top of the power ladder." The internet exploded. Public figures spoke out. Celebrities, lawyers, and even former patients from other institutions began posting videos recounting similar abuses. An impromptu documentary went viral. They weren't crazy. And finally, justice reacted. A warrant for the preventive arrest of Aurelio Dinas was issued. Charges: criminal conspiracy, medical manipulation, sexual abuse, corruption. and deliberate concealment of paternity. All of Brazil watched as the senator was handcuffed outside his home, still wearing his usual arrogance, but sweating through a suit that couldn't hide his fear. At the police station, he stayed silent, but the damage was done, and then came the cruelest part. The night Ariel was arrested, Lúcia was moved to a secure hotel, monitored, protected. But at 3:17 a.m., cameras in the hallway showed a shadow moving swiftly. When they checked the room, it was open and empty. Lúcia had vanished. No signs of forced entry, no broken cameras, no evidence left behind, except one thing, her crucifix, placed gently on the pillow. Like a message, like a farewell, Brazil was in shock, and Gustavo devastated, because now, more than ever, he would have to prove that his mother existed, even if the world tried once again to erase her. Chapter 12, A World Without. Traces and the trail of blood. Some disappearances don't feel real. They feel like scenes from a bad movie, the kind where the character vanishes without explanation and no one believes it. But Lúcia's disappearance wasn't scripted. It was a live nightmare, and this time, there was no guaranteed ending. The hotel room was intact, bed made, lights on, cameras working until 3:16 a.m., and after that, only shadows. The face of the person who entered was never shown, and the system, ironically, suffered a recording failure for exactly 3 minutes. 3, the exact amount of time between the entry and the void. Gustavo arrived just minutes after the alarm was triggered. He slammed the door open with his shoulder, tore through everything, screamed, begged. But the only sign Lúcia had been there was her crucifix left on the pillow and a folded note tucked into the sheets. It was a copy of a letter, handwritten, undeniably hers, and it said only, "If I disappear again, don't come looking with anger, come with faith. Sometimes what vanishes is what shines brightest after." But what hurt was the rest. The handwriting trembled, and at the bottom, a name, Maristela. No one knew who she was. Gustavo didn't recognize it. The police dismissed it as a false lead, but he knew his mother, and she never left. Words behind by accident. He started digging, and he found her, Maristela dos Remedios, former employee at Santa Alliance Psychiatric Institute, retired, living in isolation on a small farm in the interior of Minas Gerais, according to old records. She was responsible for the ward where Lúcia was held in the 1980s. She had disappeared from the public eye since then, but now she could be the key. Gustavo got in a car, alone, and went after her. The road was dirt, the sun was brutal, and the smell of forest seemed to want to hide what was coming. When he arrived, he clapped at the gate. An elderly woman opened the door, wrinkled face, haunted eyes. "You're her son, aren't you?" He only nodded. She lowered her head, cried, and said, "I tried to warn them. I swear I did. But they silenced us, with pills or with threats." Maristela led Gustavo to a small back room. There, among old boxes and moldy papers, she pulled out an old planner. Inside, names of patients, admission dates, and handwritten notes. Among them, one phrase highlighted with a faded highlighter. "Lúcia had baby. Man ordered it registered as dead, but I saw the baby alive. Healthy. They took it away." Gustavo collapsed to his knees. He didn't cry, but his chest heaved, as if the world were crushing him from the inside. That sentence was the final seal, the proof. Maristela went on. "She wrote me a letter last week, said that if she disappeared, I should give this to you," and she pulled out a brown envelope, sealed with tape along the edges. Inside, another letter, just one line. "If truth takes me, may it bring you back to me," and enclosed, an address, Rua das Magnolias, 157, Barrio São Francisco, Recife. Gustavo stood up, hugged Maristela, thanked her with a broken voice, and promised, "If she's alive, I'll find her. If she's dead, I'll make Brazil fall to its knees for it." As he left, he saw something hanging from the gate, tied to a branch of a mango tree, a purple cloth, torn, dirty, but unmistakable. Lúcia's blanket. It wasn't coincidence. It was a clue, and now the search was on, with Brazil watching and power squirming. Chapter 13, Magnolia Streets. Walls of silence. Some places hold more than just walls. They hold stories. They hold pain, and Rua das Magnolias was one of those. Short, narrow, forgotten by time. Old houses, laundry lines in the back, the scent of soap mixed with sorrow. But at one specific address, number 157, the past was knocking on the door. Gustavo arrived in silence, dressed in black, hat pulled low. He didn't want attention. He knocked 3 times. Nothing. Again. Silence. Just as he was about to turn away, a child appeared from the side of the house. Messy hair, stained t-shirt, holding a doll with no head. She looked at him with curiosity and asked, "Are you the son of the lady with the blanket?" Gustavo froze. "I am." The girl smiled, as if she had just won a bet with someone invisible. "She said you come. Told me to say, the truth lives on the other side of the wall," and she ran off, laughing like she'd shared a secret she didn't even understand. Gustavo went around to the back of the house. There, a small wall separated the yard from the neighbor's lot. He climbed it carefully, jumped over, and what he saw froze him inside. It was a backyard, a makeshift shelter, a kind of refuge, and sitting beneath a tree, Lúcia, barefoot, wearing a pale blue dress, holding in her hands the old radio she never abandoned. When she saw her son, she didn't cry. She didn't smile. She simply opened her arms like someone offering forgiveness without saying a word. Gustavo fell to his knees, wrapped her in an embrace that felt like it had been born 38 years earlier. They stayed like that for minutes. No words, only the soft hiss of the radio, like a heart trying to tune back in. Then, she explained, "They came. I knew they would, but I also knew you'd understand the letter. Maristela, she was my last bridge. I just needed to disappear without a trace, but leave no doubt." He asked, "Why didn't you warn me earlier?" She squeezed his hand. "Because you needed to find me through faith, not guilt." There, in that hidden yard, she showed him what no one expected, a suitcase. Inside, hidden records, letters from other patients, torn medical reports, cassette tapes with the voices of women erased from history. It was a clandestine archive, a museum of silence, and Lúcia knew it couldn't stay hidden. Gustavo made a decision right there. He called for an urgent press conference, but not in a hotel, not in an auditorium. He set up a stage in the middle of a public square. Daylight, no script, and he led his mother by the hand to the center. "This woman is the true founder of my story, and today she will speak." The nation watched, eyes filled with tears. Lúcia told everything, every piece, every name, every woman, and in the end, she raised her crucifix. "I'm just one, but behind me, there are hundreds. If they call me crazy, then the world better prepare to hear the scream of all the others." Social media exploded. Protests erupted across the country. Women's organizations united. International justice moved forward with investigations, and Santa Line Hospital was officially shut down. But while all of this unfolded, one man was watching from inside a special cell in Brasilia, Aureo Dines, and when he saw the image of Lúcia hugging her son, he spat on the floor of the cell and muttered, "She won, but this isn't over, because the devil, my friend, doesn't die easy." Chapter 14. When pain becomes law, some pain only ends when it becomes law. And what Lúcia had lived through was far too big to die in a headline. It had to become change. And that's what Gustavo understood when he saw the crowd gathering in front of the National Congress. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about what could never be allowed to happen again. They called it the Lúcia dos Anjos Law, an emergency bill backed by more than 200 members of parliament, proposing an end to psychiatric hospitalization without a well-founded judicial decision, creation of a national database of institutionalized patients, mandatory review of psychiatric reports for women institutionalized in the past 30 years, penalties for doctors, politicians, or institutions involved in clinical abuse cases. The vote was symbolic, broadcast live, and when the screen lit up approved, the entire country roared. But the loudest voice was Lúcia's, who, sitting beside her son, only whispered, "Now they'll be able to come back." That same day, Gustavo resigned from the presidency of his companies. He created an official foundation funded by the fortune inherited and multiplied through decades of silence. But now, with a new name, Erased Voices Institute, its mission to identify, shelter, and restore identity to all women unjustly institutionalized. Many didn't even know who they were anymore. Some had families who believed they were dead, and others were still alive, waiting for someone to believe in them. But not everything was redemption. In his cell, Ariel was receiving limited visits, but he still had influence. His name continued to surface in shady contracts. He passed power through old allies. He was the kind of man who didn't fall. He buried himself standing, until one day, an envelope arrived at the Institute. No return address. Inside, a letter, handwritten, shaky letters, like from an elderly hand, but with a crystal clear message. Your mother's story isn't the only one, but she's the only one who didn't forget to fight. Take care of her, because what's coming next might be even worse. And enclosed, a list. 27 names. Doctors, social workers, prosecutors, all tied to the forced institutionalization network. People still walking free, still active, still silent, as if nothing had ever happened. It was a warning and a new beginning, because Gustavo realized taking down the senator was only the first step. Now came the hardest part, taking down the system. But he was no longer alone. He had an entire nation behind him, and a mother with firm eyes and an unshaken heart, holding his arm as if to say, "Go, my son. Now it's you who carries me." And so he went. But before taking that next step, he turned to her and asked, "Do you forgive me?" She smiled and replied, "Only those who remember can forgive." Time stood still, but the story still needed its final chapter. Chapter 15, Under the Bridge. Above the lie, some people are born invisible, but they weren't born to live erased. And Lúcia Helena dos Anjos was one of them. A woman made of scars, faith, and resistance. Once called crazy, a beggar, a shadow, and who ended up becoming the face of courage for an entire country. Time passed. Gustavo rebuilt his life, far from suits and mirrored glass today. He walks the streets with the same steady steps his mother once used to dive into a freezing river and pull him back to life. But now, he dives into stories, into causes, into faces the world once ignored. The foundation grew. The Institute earned its own headquarters, and Lucia's old radio still plays on a shelf in the office corner, buzzing softly, like a heart that never stopped beating, even when no one was listening. But the most beautiful moment came on a rainy morning, the kind that washes more than it wets. Lúcia, now with fully white hair, was invited to step onto a stage. She was to receive the National Medal for Human Rights. But when they called her name, she didn't stand up. She asked for someone else to come forward, a little girl, about 7 years old, dark skin, hair tied back, simple dress. She was the daughter of one of the women the Institute had rescued from illegal institutionalization months earlier. Lúcia pointed at the girl and said, "This right here is the living medal. I'm just the echo," and the whole country cried, but not from pain, from relief, from healing. Because in the end, folks, Lúcia's greatest victory wasn't proving she told the truth. It was turning pain into a path. It was making sure other mothers weren't silenced. And it was teaching her son that being born isn't enough. You have to be reborn when the world tries to erase you. Now, if you ask me where she lives today, I'll tell you, no longer under the bridge. She lives in a country she helped build, a country that still stumbles, still pretends not to see, but can no longer say it didn't know. And her crucifix, it hangs on a wall, next to the words she once wrote. They called me crazy, but I was just a mother, and a mother never forgets. Yeah, there are stories we invent, but this one, life wrote itself. So tell me, what did you think of this tale, huh? Drop your comment below, hit that like to support the channel, and subscribe so you don't miss more powerful stories like this one. See you next time. From your Grandpa Rico. Because listen, anyone who forgets their mother is already half dead inside.